See. Hello and welcome to New York Augmented Reality. It's great to have you all back. Kim, Fa, it's very nice to see you there. Jason, excellent to see you. So many familiar faces. And it's not giving me all the thumbnails. But great to see you all. And welcome back for another New York Augmented Reality event. We're really excited to have you here. As always, Barry and I worked hard to put this event together, and we think it's going to be a great event, and we hope you enjoy. So we're just going to roll right into it and get started because we have a pretty jam-packed event. So this past month, host, if you could just let people from the waiting room in, that'd be great. This past month, our meetup group hit a milestone of 1,250 members, and our group continues to grow each month, and we're one of the fastest growing groups in augmented reality. We have hosted over 20 events this past year. This is our 21st, and this is the third event of 2022. And
can we drink?
Sorry, Barry.
No, I was going to ask, can we drink?
Yes, please.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. And then throughout these 20 events, we have hosted over 60 speakers from across the augmented reality industry to learn more about some incredible projects. So thank you for being part of the group. On April 21st, we have a meetup with Mark Pesce, who is the author of Augmented Reality Unboxing Tech's Next Big Thing, and he's a really renowned futurist in the industry. And we also have Matt Tullis, who's the VP of Mixed Reality at Ultraleap. So you could RSVP on Meetup for that event. It should be excellent. And we have on April 11th, the Great Display Debate with display tech experts Jerry Ellsworth and Carl Guttag. It will be hosted by Barry Seff, our hardware expert, as they battle off for our first display debate and discussion. So that should be fun. That's April 11th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. Now, speaking of Barry Seff, I just want to take a minute to introduce the co-organizer of the group. Without you, Barry, this meetup would not be possible. So if you could take a minute and share some words of wisdom, that would be much appreciated.
Well, just thanking everyone for really helping to grow this group. It's been awesome. And it's nice to see some faces again, familiar faces as well as great speakers come back for some more. So appreciate everything. Thank you, Andy. Back to you.
Thank you, Barry. Well said. You can stay connected with us on Slack. So Barry, post the meetup link, post the Slack link on the chat if you'd like. You can join. We have a weekly newsletter called the Augmented Report, where we share the latest news and events. And lastly, we encourage you to use the chat to share your opinion throughout the meetup with other group mates. And you could also add one another on LinkedIn or other social medias, as you know, to continue the conversation. So that's different ways you can stay connected. Here's my brief news segment. Unity released a companion app, which you should check out. And the goal is to decrease iteration time while developing augmented reality content through the Unity desktop app. And it enables developers to capture environments and quickly iterate AR experiences through your device in intended locations. So that's the Unity companion app for iOS or Android. Niantic and Sony announced a collaboration for auditory augmented reality that's going to be implemented into Niantic games, starting with Ingress, and the companies plan on combining Niantic's real-world AR with Sony's audio tech. And lastly, Taiwan-based Perfect Corp, creators of AR beauty tools like AR Makeup Trying, is going public at via SPAC at a valuation of $1 billion, which is a which is very exciting for an augmented reality company. And they've worked with over 420 brands, including Estee Lauder, MAC, and Clinique. So that's exciting as well. Lastly, Nemo Planet, a company creating everyday smart glasses to work from anywhere, effectively and securely announced an upcoming beta release date of March 15th. And here to share more about it is Nemo's founder and CEO, Rohil. So Rohil, feel free to share some more details about that.
Cool. Thank you, Andy. Hey, everyone. I'm Rohil Dev. I'm the founder and CEO of Nemo Planet. So at Nemo, the core focus we have is to design a new computer which help people to work from anywhere. And we choose smart glasses as a computing device. And we've been working on Nemo from last, it's more than 4.8 years now. We built multiple prototypes. Of course, the initial ones were like so big and investors were super afraid, just running away. But we made progress, and now we just finished Nemo beta. It's here. Here it is. So Nemo is a full computer. Everything is inside. We kind of, the focus we have is to design the glasses. It's just super easy to use, completely standalone. So we put effort into two sectors. One, a beautiful glasses, beautiful hardware. And second one, a custom operating system. And now the OS can deliver up to 6 screens, and we can run more than 95% of the productivity apps that are currently in the market. Maybe I can quickly show you through the lens just in a few seconds. Give me a second. Let me just switch my camera. All right, so here you're seeing it's Microsoft Word over here. And when I turn my head, I got Microsoft PowerPoint app that I can completely edit and make PPTs. Here I got a player with Slack side by side. So it's a quick preview. You will not get the brighter experience showing through the camera, or the Zoom call, but it's a better experience when you wear and experience it. And I hope, I can show you guys in the near future.
Thank you, Rohil Dev. You are always, you're always welcome to come back. One question from Edward Keys. He wants to know, for productivity apps, isn't transparency a problem instead of a benefit?
Oh yeah, so there are some scenarios, right? So first of all, you're using 2 displays, so that stitch and gives some kind of a better opaque feel. And still, if the light condition is too bright, the current technologies are not meant to be overcome the sunlight. So we have a shade that we can plug in, simply like this. Let me quickly show you. So we can just plug in like this, and that helps to give better clarity for the contents that we are seeing inside.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
And lastly, before the presentations, we have 2 industry announcements. First, we have Joe Hocking with us. He's a senior staff engineer at Qualcomm Game Studios, and he's here to introduce his book, Unity in Action. Joe, it's good to have you here.
Sure. Here's the book. Long story short, it's a book to teach Unity to basically, I wrote the book to sort of like, it assumes the reader already knows how to program, so it doesn't waste time in the book teaching like what a variable is or what a function is, that kind of thing. It just gets right into Unity, which is at the time I was first learning Unity, I mean, at this point, that was like a decade ago. There weren't any resources like that. You know, every beginner's resource started with like, okay, so this is a variable, and I was, you know, so I kind of wrote the resource I wanted. I wish had existed back then. Basically, you know, so yeah, this is a book which is like, let's teach Unity to somebody who is already an accomplished software developer. They've just never used, you know, a tool like Unity before. Maybe they're a web developer, or maybe they, you know, they're used to back-end development, that kind of thing. The book is not specifically about AR. It definitely does mention AR in the final chapter, but for those of you, I would imagine that there are a lot of you who've used Unity before. You'll know that a lot of it is pretty much agnostic to the, you know, the final development or the final deployment platform. So the book is explaining how to use Unity, and then in the last chapter it explains how to deploy your projects to, you know, desktop, to the web, or to augmented reality. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. And one question from KASC. Is that a bishop on the cover?
You know, it's funny. There's actually a blurb in the book explaining about the cover. Let me just see what the blurb has to say real quick. He's the Grand Seigneur of the Ottoman Empire. I don't know. The two things that were assigned to me by the publisher were the title of the book and the cover. Everything between the covers I came up with. It's all me. But apparently they just have like a series of books, tech books with you know, illustrations out of some old timey travelogue, and so they were like, "This is your cover." I was like, "Okay."
Awesome. Thank you, Joe, for joining us. And feel free to, actually, Barry already posted a link on the chat for Joe's book. If there are any other additional resources you'd like to share, Joe, feel free to post it in the chat. Thank you. Okay, and we have a job alert. Previous NYAR speaker, Dana Chermesh-Reshef, and I still can't pronounce her name right probably, is the founder and CEO of In Situ, an urban planning solution that uses AR to help visualize future developments, and she is looking to fill some roles. Here is Dana.
Okay, so thank you, Andy. Happy to be here again. Hi, everyone. So a quick explanation of what is In Situ. I'm Dana, an architect in my background and by training, living in Brooklyn, New York, and the founder of In Situ. In Situ is an augmented reality mobile app for making urban development processes accessible and understandable to people. We literally layer the world of cities. We layer cities with their future, meaning we take proposals out of City Hall and put them into their urban context, 3D models of future developments on-site in augmented reality. We launched our app, which is, let me put it here. Our app is available, and we are launching a campaign of hacking all New York City urban development processes next month. So we are working very hard on that. We started a partnership with Snap to kind of implement some of their technologies into our AR component of the product. And what we're looking for is AR kit developer to kind of help the iOS developer that we have, but preferably everyone that knows ARKit well enough. And if you know also geo anchoring issues, geo mapping, geolocation, all of this, that's even better. And we look for Lens developer to help with just production of all the Snap Snap initiatives, mini initiatives with them in-house. So I'll put here my email. Feel free to reach out. As just quick demo that will take like a minute, I'll share my iPhone, and feel free to ask questions either in the chat or via email. Right. Let's see. So this is Bella, and this is our app, again, available in iOS. Everything that is going on in New York and under review is now here, and we can get into it and see some documents about the projects, etc. And if I'm near the site, I should be able to click the AR view and to see it. The way, this is how it looks. So this is, content is not supported. So I'll put here, sorry. I tried to show the YouTube of our first pilot last year in Manhattan. So I'll just put it here and take a look, because that's the AR, how the AR looks. That's it. If you have any questions, again, feel free to reach out. Thank you, Andy, again, and thanks everyone.
Thank you, Donna. Amazing having you. And reach out to Donna if you are interested in the job role. Thanks for joining. Okay. Now, time to move on to our presentations. It's an honor to introduce our speakers, those who are making the impossible possible and augmenting our industry forward. Thank you all for joining us. After each presentation, we'll have time for questions. So during the presentation, feel free to post questions or discussions in the chat, and we'll take time afterwards to ask them to the speakers. Now, I'm excited to introduce our first speaker, Daniel Greenspan, and I have a very personal bio for him. As a child growing up in Scotland, Daniel was already into computers when a kilobyte of RAM was considered acceptable. Moving to London and studying electrical and electronic engineering in Manchester, he's always been drawn to the audio-visual side of the industry, dealing with everything from high-power amplifiers to live broadcast television. Since moving to Israel in the mid-90s, he has focused on chip and system design for some companies, including DEC, Cisco, Intel, and has consulted for many others. Daniel is the kind of engineer who measures success by people wanting to use the product he's designed, and so he's proud to have been a lead architect to Intel's Bay Trail SoC, whose Cherry Trail derivative was the heart of the original HoloLens. Daniel is convinced that VR and AR are set to replace the current 6-inch to 60-inch two-dimensional windows through which we currently interact with the digital world around us. Some 5 years ago, realizing that Sixdof, I guess we'll find out exactly how to pronounce it. Sorry for not asking prior, but realizing that Sixdof tracking technology was going to be key to these devices, he came up with the patented idea that that's the core of Sixdof, Space's high-speed, low-latency tracking system, an idea and product that he hopes will be small yet significant contribution towards XR becoming an everyday reality. Thank you, Daniel, for joining.
Thank you so much, Andy, and thank you, Barry. It really is a privilege to be here. I've seen some of the past meetups and some of the names, so it's really lovely to be here. Hopefully, you're all seeing my screen. So I'm introducing dynamic status AR, which is where the real world meets the metaverse. I don't think we like that word, so I put it in buzzword quotes. And this is a kind of fun version of our general presentation. It's not the standard presentation rolling out. And for those of you kind of trying to focus in on what I'm going to talk about, I'm talking about augmented reality glasses. I know a lot of augmented reality is handset based. I'm really focused on the glasses. So the company Sixdof Space, as was mentioned at the intro, has been around now for coming up 6 years. I'm sorry, I'm stuck with this in the top. The company has been around for coming up 6 years now. And we have right from the beginning been talking about high-speed optical tracking. We've not just jumped on the new metaverse bandwagon. This is what we wanted to do. And I'm going to show you where we were pushing. The slide is also something that we were showing 5 years ago. We were looking at the pipeline. This is for virtual reality. And we were saying in virtual reality that there are really 3 stages. We need to get the head position, we need to calculate the image, and then we need to squirt it to the screen. And in those days, you know, we were seeing lot of people putting large graphics accelerators into their devices, burning a lot of power. Sending the display to the image, we realized that image technology, display technology would get better, but nobody was putting that much effort into the accurate head position. And we realized that this is a sum of the three parts. And if we could improve the accurate head position style of things, we would improve the overall experience. And in those days, the focus was on reducing the nausea. My aim is to get motion to photons down to 10 milliseconds. We've actually got it down to 12 in some of our setups. And I know a lot of the other systems out there are several times larger than that. So the company today is around 15 people. We're based in Jerusalem, Israel. The founding partners, all three of us, are still together. And the patents have started to issue. We have been continually helped by the Israel Innovation Authority. Those of you that have come across these various innovation authorities, they set a high bar to get into the project, make you work hard to get in there. We're also proud to have been a NASA iTech finalist. If anyone's got questions about the NASA relationship, happy to talk about that later. The next slide isn't in the general presentation, but it's a sort of I believe thing. We're very fortunate to have a rooftop office. And, once every couple of days, we walk out and we have this glorious scene in front of us. Yes, it's a building site at the bottom, but you've got this sunset and the sky. And every time we see a picture like this or a vista like this, it brings back what we want to do with augmented reality. We want the virtual world to be good enough that it actually replaces this feeling of walking out and having this marvelous vista in front of you. So why tracking? It's maybe the least sexy part of augmented reality, but it's the bridge between the real world and the virtual world. If we can't lock the virtual world to the real world, we just end up with a kind of soup. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples of the soup today and how we're hoping to offer something much better. I'm going to jump into our technology. It was great in the introduction hearing Dana talk about lens development. Because when I talk about lens development, I'm actually talking about a piece of plastic or a piece of glass that we have had to develop. Because normal tracking systems or normal optical tracking systems that you have on your virtual reality glasses or your augmented reality glasses use a standard 2D camera with a fisheye lens on it. And it's kind of okay for taking 2D pictures. It maybe have optimized it to just take in black and white, but it produces an awful lot of data and it takes roughly 30 milliseconds to do that. And we were looking on, game changing this tracking. And we wanted to compress the 2D image that would be seen in the optical domain. So we're actually, I'm going to show this a little bit on the next slides. We are using a lens, glass or plastic lens to compress the image while it's still optical. And then we get much less data to bring into the digital domain. And that's what I'm going to try and demonstrate on this slide here. If you focus on the 2D graph at the bottom left, the first time I've done this slide with animation, so hopefully it'll work. Imagine you're looking out on a world, and it's a very rudimentary 2D camera here, 30 pixels by 15 pixels. And there are two lights in our field of view. So we'd be reading out 450 pixels to just see these two lights. Here are my two lights. And we'd have to read out every single one of these squares to find where the lights are. In our technology, we compress this image, firstly, in the vertical domain. So we take all these columns and we squash it into a single row of pixels. You see down here at the bottom. And then we do it again in the horizontal domain, we squash all the pixels. So we end up with two single rows of pixels. And if I jump over to the table here, you can see that rather than having to read out 450 pixels, we only have to read out 45. And as the resolution climbs up, as we go to a 2K camera or a 4K camera, you can see that we are down to maybe 1/700th of the data to get out the sensor. And that means that we can run the sensor much faster than a typical 2D camera sensor and still be getting out much less data. And since day one, we've been connecting our systems over standard USB to 100-based Ethernet, whereas most of the other camera-based systems that you'll see, if they do have an external connection, it requires USB 3 and something to do some heavy lifting of bandwidth. And here is really the lens. This is the core of our system. The concept is this dome lens here that focuses light depending on azimuth angle alpha on different pixels, but irrespective of the elevation angle beta. And we actually have created these lenses. This is a diamond turned initial prototype. We've now mass produced them in injection molded plastic. And let's get back to the difficulty of tracking. There are a whole load of problems that some of us experience when we try a new system, and other of us that design systems maybe for the wider audience know that there are issues. One of my favorite ones is this last one here, which is the camera. And it was only, you know, when we've been running the company for a year or two that we realized that this is a serious issue. So I'm going to flip over a couple of slides. This is showing our product. This is a grab bag of our customers. I'm not going to give the names. A little bit about the markets, a little bit about the competition. And now I'm going to talk about dynamic status AR, which is really the way that I've started thinking about augmented reality in industrial environments, in productive environments. And I'd like you to come and think with me on this, and happy to have your feedback in the Q&A. If I look at virtual reality, it's a separate paradigm from augmented reality. We are living in the virtual world. We interact with virtual objects. And of course, in virtual reality, you don't want to be bumping into that table or bumping into that wall. The objects in the real world are a problem in virtual reality. The exception to this is kind of Tilt 5, who I know have been here before, because I think they do a great job of saying our augmented reality, virtual reality case study is we're with our friends. So we want to be with our friends and having this virtual reality game board. But leaving aside those specific cases, virtual reality is its own category. And then we have what I'm going to call first stage augmented reality. And this is where the market's at now. And it's basically projecting an image into the real world. But the real world is not interacting with us. The real world is the passive. I like to say the real world is the stage. So this is the nice graphics that our, our marketing people came up with. After a lot of talking, I prefer the next slide. This is really what augmented reality feels like today as a cynic. You know, a lot of the use cases, if we could just hang a smartphone in front of our eyes with that little 6-inch screen, that's kind of the intelligence that we've got. And this comes back to something I read in Road to VR, which is to say that the smartphone-based AR system or the other AR system doesn't really understand what's going around with it. You know, it knows that there's a surface. It might work out that there's a table, that there's a cup. It can't really expand more than that. And what we're trying to do with dynamic status AR is to bring much more knowledge of the systems that we're looking at. So this graphic illustrates what dynamic status AR is. As we're looking around our environment, maybe it's a factory environment, maybe it's a workbench, maybe we're walking through a service center, we actually want to learn stuff about the real world. The glasses or whatever we're using for augmented reality is our connection to the real world. We've got systems that have got temperatures, that have got stresses, that have got other things that they want to tell us. And we can use the augmented reality system to bring us that real world information into our field of view. And that's what I look at as the real, if you like, killer app for augmented reality. The real world is a story, and the glasses enable us to see things that we couldn't see otherwise. So here's the summary. Virtual reality, first stage AR and dynamic status AR. And when we look at, for example, this is Inc.com's list of the top 10 use cases for AR, they actually fall into these categories, and they don't fall into it very well. The ones in gray are better served by virtual reality. You know, if you're going to take a student in a classroom to ancient Pompeii, then they don't want to see the classroom around them. They want to see ancient Pompeii around them. That's virtual reality. We've got the ones in red here that are now in first stage AR, where, you know, the sales pitch to the guy that's meant to be ordering this multi-$1,000 headset is, okay, great. So it shows me an overlay in front of me. It gets back to that smartphone screen in front of my head, or maybe to the static overlay. And there's only one of these top 10 use cases that for me hits the button, and that is this one of retail. Here's the example here. You're trying on a wedding dress, not something I do very often, but the real world changes. Somebody moves around and the virtual world responds. The virtual dress moves around on the real person. Now, this case works quite well because the phone behaves like a mirror. Latency can be brought under control. And that is where I'd like to take our other augmented reality cases. So here are some real world examples of where it can make a difference. We want to be looking through the lens, and we want to be having some information put in front of us that is actionable. This carton leaks, let's take it off the production line. So it's got to tell us what's going on and where it is. Here we are. What do I need to know and where is it? And this is because our world is complicated. You know, when I was looking into the technology, Google has done an optimization on error codes. If you do a Google search for error codes, they've actually got some sort of filter that they do that they'll bring you the codes up in their high up in their search listing because there's that many people looking at it. And then you end up with these diagrams and these descriptions that you don't really understand. And with augmented reality, not that we're necessarily going to use it for our washing machines, but for things that are more complicated, we can get that clear guidance that tells us what to do, and we get status in front of us. The other thing that we've done is we've said, we know there's a lot of cloud systems out there, and cloud is great where the thing that's generating information can be a long way from the thing that's consuming the information. But when you're in the same room as a piece of equipment, you don't really need the cloud to be mediating the data transfer. You want a fast, reliable data transfer that's local. And what we've done is we are using the infrared tracking beacons that allow us to get Sixdof to also do the data transfer. And I'm going to show you just a screenshot of our video. We can post the full link later to the video. And by using the positioning beacon, we do use positioning beacons to deliver, as well as its position data, we can lock that data to exactly the place where it's happening. I'm going to jump ahead. This is the example. We demonstrated this last week at NWC in Spain. We've got a headset, Lumos headset, which we found was quite easy to work with. And the headset's moving quite quickly here. And yet we are able to track specific locations on this mock server. And the data that you see here, for example, one of these cards is reporting the voltage is okay, and another card is reporting a failure of its AC input. That data has actually been sent to the headset through line of sight infrared. It doesn't require an internet connection. It doesn't require network logging capabilities. This information is encoded and transfers through the optical channel. A little bit about Sixdof space. We sometimes get asked if we're building a headset. No, the answer is we are focusing on allowing other OEMs that want to build headsets that maybe thought of using the Vive headset or something else and have realized that if they want to do it properly, they need to build it themselves. And we are focusing on engaging with those people and enabling them to produce the best headset for their situation. And then in terms of the company progress, I talked about infrared beacons. We are going to be able to move on to doing more generic tracking. And finally, this is actually where the company started from, is high-speed camera-free VR and AR tracking. And we'll use the existing room lights as the beacon. So we'll be able to track your position just based on the existing room lights. I've run through the presentation. I'm sure there's questions. You're also welcome to be in touch with us separately. Mark, my CEO, is on the call, and he'll be in New York coming up in a week or two's time. So please feel free to reach out in terms of business and investment opportunities.
Thank you, Daniel. Great presentation. I'll pass it to Barry for questions, and post your emails on the chat so we can just easily copy and paste it as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. We don't have time for that many questions, so I will try to avoid the highly technical questions, which are great, but maybe not applicable to everyone. Okay, so someone's asking about the human factor issue. Does avoidance of nausea also cover reduction of the kind of disorientation that reportedly makes people unfit to perform other tasks after AR, VR immersion, such as driving?
Oh, that's a great one. I used to tell people, you know, we've got a Vive at work, and I used to say, I know to wait 20 minutes after playing with the Vive before I get in the car. Yes, absolutely. There's the vestibular ocular reflex, which gets messed up when you're using virtual reality, and your body kind of compensates for it. And a lot of that is down to latency. There's a little bit down to, and you've had the experts on the focus and distance convergence. Most of the problem, from what I've seen, is down to latency. The last thing I'll tell you, we've got one of our staff members, you know, an amazing engineer, Within 3 seconds on putting on a VR headset, she is feeling sick and she needs to sit on a standard 4-legged chair for the rest of the day. So we've seen people being triggered by this delay, and it's the one thing that we're pushing to fix really from get-go of the company.
Awesome. Okay, I'll give one more question about co-located map sharing. Is saying, is co-located map sharing SLAM, which is location mapping for those that may not be privy to all these acronyms, is SLAM supported? And it's a two-part question. Is the solution low power enough to use a small battery powered module attached to an existing headset or controller? Or well, actually, that's kind of what I was wondering. Is this going to be like an add-on, or is this going to just be sold to the device makers and then they'll already incorporate it as part of the assembly?
Okay, so regarding the co-located map, another great question. Because we're beacon-based and because our beacons have their IDs, the whole point is that you can create a common map and everyone can work according to it. In fact, what we saw here, or what I demonstrated with Dynamic Status AR, is the beacons can actually report their own location over the infrared. So you can walk into somewhere, add another beacon, and you won't have to do a software update to anything around it because they will get the information from the beacon. Remind me the other question a moment.
It's saying, is the solution low power enough to use as a small battery powered module attached to an existing headset or controller? But I'm wondering if they're trying to say, is this going to be part of the actual device, an assembly of within a device, like you're going to sell directly to OEM manufacturers, or is this like an add-on? I would think your business model.
I don't think we can do this as an add-on. The level of integration that you need is really quite high.
Yeah.
In terms of battery life, we've had this thing run 10 hours straight on a single battery pack. We're definitely already in the low power area, and obviously with OEM engagement, we take that down to whatever envelope they want to hit.
Great, thank you so much. Awesome talk.
Thank you.
And everyone will contact you, I'm sure.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Daniel. Thank you, Mark. Great to have you guys here.
And good night.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah. Thank you, Barry.
And thank you, Barry, also.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Next up, I'm excited to have Caitlin Krause here, a mixed reality experience designer who thrives at the intersection of technology, innovation, and well-being. Caitlin founded the mixed reality studio and consultancy MindWise in 2015. She teaches about digital well-being at Stanford University, is a senior strategist at the Virtual World Society, and is the story creator and creative producer for Science VR, winner of the WebXR World of the Year at the 2022 Poly Awards. In 2021, she authored the book Designing Wonder, Leading Transformative Experiences in VR. Caitlin has advised global organizations, including Google, Meta, Oracle, TED, Evernote, University of San Francisco, ETH Zurich, Smithsonian Institution, the US State Department, and New York Augmented Reality, most importantly. She has created and run numerous collaborative experiences in social XR, fusing presence, storytelling, meditation, and emotional intelligence. She is a writer and designer of digital therapeutic applications. After 2 decades of teaching and leadership experience, she wrote Mindful by Design, helping individuals and teams navigate complexity and change, prioritizing mindful well-being, design, and imagination.
Thank you so much, Andy. And you had me smiling ear to ear for the addition of New York AR. I think I'll put that at the top of the bio when I redo it. So it's so great to be here. And I have to echo, what Daniel was sharing. I've been looking forward to this for several months and part of the community, and used to live in Brooklyn. So I do feel like I can represent, and I'm on the West Coast today, but I feel that affinity, and just, thanks so much to this group for coming together. What I'm going to share is about storytelling today, and a little mindfulness and wonder and awe. And underneath that, I just want to impress upon this group that I feel the gravity of this moment. I also believe a lot in creative wonder and sense of levity in the midst of difficult times. So just know that the community here is what I've been looking forward to, and I feel that sense of solidarity. So just kind of holding this moment and naming it if it's also difficult for you. And today I'm talking about storytelling, and it's what I love to talk about. So my company, MindWise, I founded it after serving as a programmer and then went into education design. I'm going to play this game where I start a 15-minute timer for myself. So just know, Barry, I'm playing along. And if this feels like an appetizer to you and you want to dive in more, on most of my slides, I've put my Twitter handle, Instagram is the same, and I also have my website. So I'm happy to share resources and keep in touch with everybody. Again, echoing what Daniel was sharing about the rooftop and that idea of beauty, I know that we live in worlds that can feel like this sometimes. And even in the midst of this rushing kind of frantic energy, I work a lot to design and create environments that would feel more like this. So I love to escape in my kayak and go out on lakes and just feel that magic and wonder. And, you know, for me, I bring a lot of that into worlds that are VR, worlds that are AR, you know, having a sense of presence and also this, this feeling of being beyond yourself, beyond your limits. So we'll talk about that a little bit today, because with storytelling, I map a lot of what I call the hero's journey into immersive. So thinking about yourself and your background, it's a nice invitation to think about each of us having different superpowers and how augmented reality, virtual reality, a lot of these storytelling invitations are ways for us to access our creative impulse and bring out those abilities and make them more visible to others. You know, how are we making the invisible visible? And part of my work involves a sense of intersectionality. I grew up as somebody that was both a scientist and an artist, and I felt sometimes pigeonholed into different boxes. This is my own identity map of some of the ways that people have associated me with different words. And sometimes I think there's the danger of a single story. That's a great TED Talk by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. You know, she talks about being sometimes expected to serve just one role, one purpose, one story. And we all know that we carry a multifaceted nature of backgrounds and expertise. So, you know, just acknowledging that and using AR as a way to bring out our multifaceted nature, to encourage other people to share their stories and also to listen and to be considerate. I think there's a whole new dynamic. So when people talk about, you know, I know, again, one of Daniel's closing slides was about the metaverse and, you know, seizing the moment. And I think I echo that too. I think it's not just disappearing into something that's dystopian. It's about humanity and about what type of voice we want to share, how to listen to each other's stories and encourage a sense of deep connection. So I like to empower that and ask all the questions that tease out those opportunities for connection. And along the way, my work is at the bridge of applied research. So I love the work I do at Stanford. It lets me really connect with people in Virtual Human Interaction Lab with Jeremy Bailenson, other researchers, Walter Greenleaf. There are all kinds of stories that come out about emotion underneath the design. So some of what I'm researching involves empathy, involves the brain and liminal states, and more fluid attachments to one identity. So a lot of what we're doing is really looking at the way that we learn best and connect best. And it tends to be when we tap into emotion. So as I design for stories and engagement, I'm thinking, okay, how do we create a story that has that rich tapestry of emotion? And this is a chart, I believe it was 1980 that Robert Plutchik designed the emotion wheel. He started with 8 primary emotions that he was mapping, and then went into the sub-levels of nuances of emotion. And you can script different programs, different storytelling, whether it's AR, VR, you can look at that classic emotion wheel and really try to map for certain user experiences and audience and player engagement. So, this is one example. Some people say there are 4 primary human emotions. So sometimes I'll start with that. And if you want to guess in the chat what they are, I'll give you a hint. 3 of them rhyme and 1 of them doesn't. So I think it's kind of a fun game to think about emotion. Mark Brackett at Yale has a center called the Center for Emotional Intelligence. And he says that most of us, at least in Western culture, grow up never naming our emotions. We're very rarely asked. Maybe it's primary, but we're not always asked about naming feelings and emotions underneath. So later we can go back to the chat. Let's see if we have any guesses. Yeah. So the 4 primary emotions, yes. Awesome. Thank you, Trey, for playing. So they're usually mad, glad, sad, and scared. And scared is the emotion that makes us do what we wouldn't normally choose to do sometimes. I started off thinking about these emotions, how they play out in film. And when I was overseas, I worked abroad for over a decade, founded my company overseas. I lived in Belgium and Switzerland. And because I was so curious about international culture, I got my press credentials and started to cover film festivals as a storytelling journalist. So I was taking live footage and using an immersive, I started out using one of the Samsung 360 cameras, which people looked at thinking it was an exotic kind of camera on the green carpet. This is in Zurich. But when I started to shoot the film fests, I realized that the difference when you shoot in 360 is that your stories are captured in a spherical shape. So as a writer and storyteller, I was also thinking about designing for storytelling that's nonlinear. So it's true for AR, it's true for VR. As we're thinking as storytellers and creators, we're thinking about user journeys that are world to world. So how are we creating invitations to explore that really elicit the emotions and the behaviors that we intend? So this is an example. Jessica Brillhart does a great job mapping out these story journeys in spherical. If you're, say, in an environment and you want someone to feel invited, you might place a symbolized by yellow, some kind of object in your AR world. They're invited to explore it. If you have something represented by the red circle that comes up behind and starts to make a noise or interferes with their space, we are physical animals. We are going to go into our limbic system will fire. We will want to fight, flight, or freeze. So, it's really mindful when I'm introducing story design to have people think about, well, what do you want that person X to feel like? And do you want them to be the main character in the story, or do you want them to be a voyeur or be someone that co-participates in something collaborative? So again, back to that classic hero's journey, I'm a big fan of both the Joseph Campbell version and the variations. You can map some world-to-world stories that give people invitations to play, to challenge their assumptions, to break some limiting beliefs and barriers. So, we're talking, really broad strokes here today about what storytelling gives us the opportunity to think about. Ultimately, it's about connection. So again, a small game, but when I'm teaching stories, I'll ask, what's this? And most often people will say, yes, it's Pac-Man. And Pac-Man is usually hungry. And in most stories, the hunger drives a character to search for completion. And this is a very basic classic story. If it's a love story, they're looking for that relationship. If it's a championship, they're looking for some kind of prize at the end of the journey. And I do read on the side, I have here next to me Frankel's Man's Search for Meaning. I think we're looking for meaning in the metaverse too. And a lot of our AR, whether it's a game, we're still playing with these ideas that are classic storytelling. So what I've been doing lately is also researching the brain and how we can design for wonder and flow, like how the brain can ride liminal states of creation, how we get into the zone, both as creators and as participants, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi is a researcher who did great work in the field of flow, and he maps out something called the flow channel. So if you're curious about both storytelling and riding waves of wonder, some of my research led me toward this idea of flow, because storytellers need to be able to access that tool for creation and have creativity feel like they're surfing a wave instead of constantly listening to the critic's voice. So the more I research into those states, the more I realize, wow, what Csikszentmihalyi was mapping out as classic flow states and facets of flow perfectly map to what we want to prioritize in AR. So AR and VR, how awesome that most cases we have an ability to focus on a task, because we can really look at how to drive necessary information, and also have that maybe slight loss of a sense of time. Some people think that's a bad thing. I think that's a great thing, that we're not always having alerts and pop-ups that are superfluous, that we can really transcend some of the limitations we would have in the physical world and ride the ride of an experience. So that's personally why I love AR and VR. So these are all facets of flow that you can use in mapping journeys to really make experiences better, that are immersive and visceral and powerful. This is a space that I designed in VR, where we had a group meetup and a workshop, and I could design it with the Aurora Borealis behind us. So this is fully immersive. Sometimes I lead trainings, and they're across both the VR space and AR spaces. I've led invitations, exercises that are outside that have some AR as part of them. This is an example of a golf experience from Niantic, not mine. I'm showing you the gamut. And I've done work with live projection mapping. This is an example. Unreal Garden has this beautiful park space that has all kinds of, it's partly artificial, but there's nature involved too. So if you can't tell already, I love nature. And that type of connection to something that feels mindful and makes you have a better quality of well-being. So now one of my projects that I'm really excited about is immersive opportunities to play with storytelling and have live time creative space. So both using AR and also using VR in different environments, having people collaborating in live time and doing sketching. And the sketching is more formative, not summative. So playing around with music that actually gets people into a better creative state of flow, having the music timed in sequence with elements of poetry. And then you have to see people, they come in and they tell me, I'm not an artist, but they're seeing what they feel inspired by in the live time. And then suddenly, what comes out is a product that surprises them, because their ideas start to be physical. And that physical object is something that can serve as a story device to share with somebody else and animate thoughts and feelings that they wouldn't otherwise be able to express in words. So yeah, so this is kind of the summary of what I wanted to bring to all of you today, just this idea that XR story, specifically in AR, can lead to better connections and broaden consideration. I've been thinking about all of these sort of facets, this idea of verbalizing, the way that AR can get us to move with our whole body. Recently, I've heard that you can't just map. Jeremy Balanson and I were talking about this. I asked him, do you really empathize with something just because you jump into somebody else's perspective? And he said, you can tell that someone's empathizing by their body movement. It's not something that's happening just from the neck up. It's if I look at something, if I move to somewhere, if someone points and then I look where they're pointing and do something together. So AR has all kinds of opportunities to use these new findings that we're learning about. And again, if the hero's journey is about going into a special world and then coming back with greater knowledge, then what we're talking about is non-binary. I'm not talking about people disappearing into AR and VR and not having applications that are purely physical. I'm talking about them going across certain thresholds and having experiences and then coming back with some kind of application that leads them to better understanding. So this is one for VR that I had mapped out. And I think the beauty of AR is that there's engagement happening in live time with both worlds. So you can cross-pollinate ideas. In some, I see I have very limited time left. So I just want to wrap up and say that I found recently thinking about this, that there are about three prime ways that I could imagine emotions in AR shared right now. And the first way is that if people are in live time together in the same physical space, they could be sharing with AR. Second way, and I know Niantic has been talking about this, I just talked with them about the idea of different times, like different time locations with the place-based objects serving as that time story that other people can unpack, like geocaching. And the third way, I'm calling it individual expression as gifting, but just imagine around the world if we had different opportunities to connect with AR and actually map through each other's worlds some type of emotion shared, a color that vibrates when someone else is doing something at the same time that you're doing it. So I call this in some same place, same time, or same place in a different time, or being in two different places at the same time and sharing something in augmented reality that shows each other that your co-presence is felt. So to connect through stories, we basically just need some type of sameness. And AR is pretty amazing at bringing that about. One of the flow little capstone phrases that I love is that flow follows focus. So if you're able to focus on something, then that tends to be what your flow state is directed toward. And again, all kinds of applications. This is a beautiful park. I can share the link to it afterwards. When there was a Niantic keynote on stage at AWE, it really impressed me, hearing about the future of AR and how much is transforming right now. So I'm really curious about Lightship and talking with them, pretty much on a regular basis about ways that we can use these storytelling techniques, especially with more people invited to play the role of the agents and the builders. So I feel like now with so much becoming more open source, it's really exciting for people who are storytellers and a time for humanity. This is a picture I took at the Berlin Wall. And, it's a closing consideration to think about both relationships and our well-being and how states of imagination and wonder can help lead us into storytelling tools. I'll put up in the chat after I speak a link to invite all of you. I'm building a space called Flow Camp, and in there, there's an Arcadia model of Acadia National Park where we're going to play games and have different opportunities to get into creative flow. So that's coming out in about a month. And if people are curious, I can invite you to be part of one of the early stage of being invited to that landscape. And I have a book out that has all of my research about wonder and awe and storytelling and mindfulness. So, that link is there too. Thank you very much. And I am so happy to have been here and be talking about this in live time with such a great group. Thank you to Barry, thank you to Andy, and the whole team here for inviting me to take part.
Thank you so much, Caitlin, for joining, and I'll pass it off to Barry for one question.
Yes, if it was up to me, I'd probably have 1,000 questions for you. We'll just sit down, you and me, but that's for another time when we have a longer form.
I can also type in the chat. Anyone who asks questions, I will type my answers. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you could continue on after and say, but I just wanted to read what Greg said, not particularly a question, but you can reflect on it. He wrote, I see AR as covering the whole range between pure VR as one degenerate case. I'm not sure what it was going with that, but as one degenerate case through to a pure view of the real world as the other on a continual spectrum. Perhaps like it by example, a slider and like a variation in transparency. A session might include choosing different points along the scales required to see real or virtual objects clearly. We'd always have to allow for worst cases with respect to which experience a user has and how they feel afterwards. So whatever you'd like to retort on that. But thank you, Greg.
Wow. Gosh, there's so much with connection there. I guess what comes up in my mind is that idea of choice and feeling connected. I feel like everything, it's my view that everything is a translation, whether it's a translation into language or translation, what we put up there in a story. Seth Godin has said stories are gifts that we give to somebody else to be able to access. And so what's in my mind right now is, what does real connection mean? And if what Greg is saying, I think there's a sense of hope and connection there and listening. So feel free to keep in touch with me, Greg, because it sounds like a lot of philosophy there about opportunities for the future to bring people together. That's my response.
Thank you, Caitlin. It was great having you.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Andy. I'll put the link to FlowCamp also in the chat so that people have a chance to join.
Awesome. Thank you. Next up, we have Aaron Wisniewski from OVR Technology. He's actually has an interesting background in the smell and taste industry with multiple successful company and product launches. As co-founder and CEO of OVR Technology, he brought spatial smell technology to AR and VR, reinventing immersive experiences through smell, and supported impact-driven storytelling through scent technology. As founder and CEO also of Alice and the Magician, he has pioneered how we experience flavor by offering a library of innovative beverage aromatics, and was the creative and strategic force behind multiple successful beverage and body care brands. With these experiences, Aaron's approach is through the lens of aroma, function, and culture, with extensive experiences as chef, mixologist, sommelier, flavor designer, product developer, and technology innovator and public speaker. His skill set and perspective is very unique. He strives to continue creating technology products and experiences that enrich us through the power of smell. And I look forward to learning more about that. Thank you, Aaron, for joining us.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks, everyone. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen now. It is awesome to be here with everyone, especially these really impressive speakers. So thank you for the opportunity to let me talk a little bit about OVR Technology. So I'd love to introduce our company, our technology, kind of why we exist, and then also talk about some of the research being conducted around it, and also how it's being deployed in the real world. And quick note on the metaverse. I'm going to use the metaverse term a few times throughout this talk, probably. Forgive me for that. I'm using it really generically just to kind of describe the sum of the experiences made possible by immersive tech like AR, VR, and OVR, a lot of the engines and platforms, and a lot of the infrastructure that make that possible too. So just kind of a generic use of the term metaverse. And for me, one of the defining characteristics of the metaverse is that it's not just spatial, but it's also multisensory. All of our senses can be engaged, and I believe that scent will play a key role in making our experiences more immersive, more emotional, more engaging, and more effective too. So whether it's skills training, socializing, entertainment, commerce, healthcare, leveraging scent will improve our experiences and improve the outcomes. So at OVR, we are into developing and implementing scent technologies to help realize this version of the future. So why scent? Well, the power of scent lies in its biology. It's the only one of our senses directly linked to the limbic system in our brains. And the limbic system is the most ancient part of our brains, and it's the area that controls memory and emotion, as well as influences a great deal of our motivations and behaviors. Our sense of smell developed long before our eyes and our ears, and for thousands of years, it was the only way that we could perceive the world around us. Also, our sense of smell is fully developed and functioning when we're just 10 weeks old in the womb. And for months after we're born, it's the primary way we recognize our mothers or our caregivers. So every time we breathe in, we are using our sense of smell, and it gives us loads of information about the world around us. It drives what we eat. It helps us avoid danger. And believe it or not, it even influences who we love. That's right, because we each have our own unique odor signature, which is more unique than a fingerprint or even a retinal scan. And in that odor, there's lots of information that's carried, information about our DNA, information about our immune system, information about our diet. So it's actually believed that when two people romantically kiss each other, it's a way for them to sample each other's scent and subconsciously decide whether or not it's a good genetic match, which I think is really fascinating. Now, smell operates primarily below our conscious thought, so it actually may come as a surprise that about 75% of our daily emotions and memories are triggered by scent. It accounts for about 90% of our perception of flavor, and there's a $30 billion industry dedicated to using scent to influence and even manipulate your behavior. Every time you leave your house in the morning to go to work or wherever, you've been influenced sometimes over 30 times by scent to buy something, behave in a certain way, or to perform an act. So reinventing a sophisticated sense like smell and incorporating it into the metaverse experiences wasn't an easy task, but we had a unique angle to make it possible. So I want to introduce Ion, which is the first spatial scent technology built for the metaverse. Powered by a combination of hardware, software, and scentware, it understands user behavior in the virtual world and responds in real time. And leveraging scent not only produces richer, more realistic environments, but immersive technology actually amplifies some of the inherent benefits of scent, like improving mood or memory. So let me get into a little bit about the technology and how that works. So of the three components, the hardware component consists of a patented microtechnology that produces extremely small, precise amounts of scent on demand without the use of heat or fans, which can distort that. And this allows us both to create and clear scent in an extremely fast rate that seems like a zero latency rate. Now, that may seem like a relatively straightforward act, but it's exactly where scent technology has failed for the last 80 to 100 years. That creation and clearing, so you can rapidly change scents, and you can compound scents to create new interesting scents on the fly. And rather than just on a time frame, like a scent would be released at a certain time, scents are created by how you act and how you interact in virtual and augmented situations. The software component is kind of like the translator. So like I said, as you move about the virtual world and interact with it, it sends wireless signals to the hardware component, telling it to produce exactly the right scent or combination of scents at precisely the right moment. Now, in the real world, scent is this chaotic, invisible soup constantly swirling around us. But by studying the fluid dynamics of scent, how it moves through the air and how we breathe it in, we're able to reimagine it as a series of fixed geometries with predictable behavior that can be applied to any virtual content and works with any VR interface. Now, I should say that since the 3.5 years we've been around, we have been very VR focused, but this year especially, we're moving into AR because I believe that a technology like this shouldn't be isolated in VR. I think it has a lot of benefit in XR and even certain digital experience as well. So we'll be releasing some form factors that apply to AR as well later this year. And finally, the scentware component. So all the scents that we create are water-based. They're IFRA approved, which is the governing body to make sure they're safe. And they're formulated by using a combination of our sensory expertise and also analytical chemistry to accurately reproduce scents that we find in nature or novel ones that we can only experience in the digital world. So we actually go out into the field all over the world and have done this for years. And by using this kind of scent capture technology that we repurposed, we're able to sample the odor of certain things, places, people, experiences, or moments, and using that chemical data, recreate them in our lab. So using this core technology, we focus our efforts on high impact applications in really 3 industry groups at the moment. Number one is training and simulation. Really, This is about high-risk occupations. This is fire, rescue, police, and military. The enhanced situational awareness and better skills acquisition offered through Scent and VR are very valuable in an industry like this where people's lives are literally on the line. The second market is arts and entertainment. And although we're not in, quote unquote, gaming yet, I'm so blown away by some of the high quality immersive experiences in development right now, and actually honored to be incorporating Scent in a few of them that I think are going to have a really big impact. And we're working kind of just like audio engineers or soundtracks would be incorporated at the conception and inception phase. And finally, one of our biggest focuses at the moment is health and wellness. There are myriad applications for Scent technology in health and wellness, in the health and wellness industry, and I'll touch on probably just a couple of them today for time's sake. And before I talk about the health applications, I want to highlight some of the research around olfactory XR. So there's a growing body of evidence around the physiological benefits of Scent, but it still pales in comparison to the research around, audio and visual. So more research needs to be done. So we started our journey with a study on the impact of OVR on pain, stress, and anxiety. This study was conducted at the Department of Clinical Psychiatry at the University of Vermont Medical Center. And through the duration of the study, participants would enjoy a daily 8-minute experience in a relaxing, multisensory nature VR environment. Data was taken right before the experience, immediately after the experience, and then again 3 hours after. And what we saw was that the average reported feelings of pain, stress, and anxiety started at a 9 on a scale of 1 to 10, and then dropped all the way down to 3 after just this short experience. And what might be even more compelling is that these results persisted even 3 hours after the experience, indicating that it's possible that we're not just kind of interrupting thought patterns and distracting, but also a lot of the activities in the experience and the relationship to Scent are actually building new skill sets that can help people calm down afterwards. And there was additional anecdotal evidence where some participants seemed to be more treatment compliant, and some of them were more active in therapy, group and personal therapy sessions. And like I said, this is very preliminary, but it's compelling. You can find the study results published in the Journal of Medical Research and Health Sciences, published last year. And we also have some additional studies ongoing that still revolve around pain, stress, and mental health. So one of the most compelling applications for multisensory VR, I think, is addiction treatment. Very often patients leave treatment early against medical advice, which dramatically increases their chances of relapse and overdose. And the tools clinicians have available to them during that detox phase are really limited. But by using olfactory VR as an acute intervention, they have found that it interrupts the fight or flight response, and patients are more likely to complete the course of treatment. In a product we released called Inhale, not only do users get to escape, like I said, but in this calming nature scenes, they learn valuable tools like mindfulness meditation, breathing exercise, and then Scent associations that are built around these positive mood states can then be repeated outside of VR as well. So it's not just escapism, it's not just distraction, it's building tools and skill sets. There's also some similarities when it comes to PTSD. Clinicians have limited tools, fewer people seek treatment than should, and many don't complete the treatment. So we partnered with Dr. Skip Rizzo of USC to introduce OVR technology to his Bravevine program, which is a multisensory VR program for combat veterans with PTSD. So exposure therapy, which is kind of the gold standard for this type of diagnosis right now, works, but only if you seek the help and only if you kind of complete the course of treatment. So Dr. Rizzo found that with many veterans, they're more likely to try and more likely to stick with VR or a technology therapy because there's less of a stigma around it. And using VR with these olfactory cues is a powerful memory trigger that takes a lot of the pressure off the patient. So in this treatment where patients are trying to kind of remember and reprocess these difficult memories, that takes all the heavy lifting and the pressure off the patient. And in a separate study at the University of Central Florida, using a multisensory VR approach for a 3-week intensive program, about 70% of the participants at the end of this program no longer met the diagnostic criteria for PTSD, which I think is incredible. Now on to some of the training and simulation applications. this is brought up before, that one of the dangers in a high stress situation in these high risk occupations is, instead of fight or flight, the freeze response. That's where the most injuries and deaths and property damage happen, is when people freeze. And people freeze because all of the sensory data, all of the input is so unfamiliar, so overwhelming, and so out of context that they don't know how to respond. So using immersive technology for training for these situations creates much better skills acquisition and much better memory recall for when they're presented with this in real life. And you can do this for things that are too dangerous, too complex, or too expensive to actually train for. And by adding olfaction, not only do you create more situational realism, more situational awareness, but you also have the added benefit of being able to identify hazards by smell alone that you wouldn't be able to see or hear. We hear it a lot from firefighters, police, and military, that certain smells mean certain things, and they wish they would have had that training or that that experience before going into a burning building or responding to a gas leak or a gas explosion. The other thing that we're getting more into this year, we haven't been as much yet, but we're really excited to break into it, is location-based entertainment. Specifically, location-based entertainment that's narrative, that tells a story, and especially one that has maybe an environmental or social implication. We recently collaborated with an Australian studio on an immersive experience called Shifting Homes, and that highlighted the impact of climate change on a remote Samoan village. So we were able to recreate the indigenous smells of that area, of that culture, and of that village to help the village elder tell his story through this immersive media in a more emotional, interactive way. And so we found that people were more engaged in the story, and rather than being a spectator, which even in VR can happen if the story isn't told well, they felt like it was more of an experience that they shared with these villagers. And of course, the more experiential it is, the more connected you feel to the people, to the cause, and the more likely people are to act. The last thing that I'll say is, recently smell has kind of been in people's minds and the news for different reasons, that people are losing it because of COVID. And it's kind of horrifying, a lot of the experiences and the lowercase d trauma people have gone through from losing their sense of smell. So I really kind of invite everyone here in this room, and I do it constantly, to really embrace our sense of smell, embrace scent technology, and weave it into these virtual experiences. So our augmented worlds, our virtual worlds in the metaverse never suffer the same consequence that those who have lost their smell due to COVID have. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Aaron. We need to see more AR, but it was an amazing presentation. I'm sure it will work very well with some AR use cases. So hopefully the next time you join, we'll have some HoloLenses with the OVR tech knocked onto it. I think that'd be
We
awesome.
are already working on it. There aren't, far enough along for me to talk about today, but next time I see you guys, we'll be AR and VR, and not so VR forward.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Last but one of the best. Really excited to have Bart Trzynadlowski here with us. I worked on some naming pronunciations the past few days. I say Trzynadlowski like 3 or 4 times every morning, and I'm almost there. Bart is an AR creator on the West Coast who most recently worked at Apple on AR prototyping for 3 years. He left in September to pursue his own independent explorations in AR, VR, and computer vision. Since departing Apple, Bart took first place for North America in the 2021 OpenCV AI competition with VR laser tag project, and built an AR game using Lens Studio, which we look forward to learning more about today. And Bart's open to any collaboration, so feel free to reach out to him afterwards, and I'll share his LinkedIn profile. Bart, I look forward to learning more about your projects. And stage is yours. Enjoy.
Thank you so much for having me. Let me try to share my screen, see if this works again. Does everybody see this? All right, great. Thanks for having me again. My name is Bart Trzynadlowski, and I'll be talking about Strike Force, which is a Snapchat game that I recently made. I'm going to just kind of cover, how the project went, how I developed it, and for people that are kind of also building non-trivial, Snapchat or AR projects, I hope that there's something that you take from this that's useful. A little bit about myself first. I used to actually live in New York City, and it was in 2016 while there that I got a HoloLens and just completely, fell in love with AR. And in 2018, I was fortunate enough to be invited to join Apple's augmented reality efforts, where I served as an experienced prototyper for 3 years, trying to think about like what the future of AR might be. I stepped away in September to just pursue, my own stuff. And one of the first things I wanted to do was check out Snapchat, because I've seen so much cool stuff, coming from creators. I wanted to kick the tires on the platform. So I decided to make a game. And this is kind of what I ended up with. So as you can see, it looks like a standalone mobile AR experience. You've got your little joypad on the bottom left. There's multiple levels, power-ups. You can shoot things, and it's basically a full game, but it's less than 8 megabytes, and it's running as a Snapchat filter, which is kind of mind-blowing. So I developed this in November and December of last year is when it came out, over the course of 7 weeks. And the way it kind of looked over those 7 weeks, for those who are curious how this kind of thing evolved, by the end of week 1, I just had a helicopter moving around facing the wrong direction. At the end of week 2, I added, the phone tilt to move the helicopter up and down. And now it kind of points where the camera points. So I kind of dialed in the control mechanism. By week 3, I had done a lot of like foundational work on the game engine itself. I'll talk about that. I built kind of a system on top of Lens Studio. I've got plane detection, I've got physics and collision, and this starting to look at like what AI might look like. End of week 4, I have a test enemy helicopter that just harasses the player by following waypoints. You can kind of see the debug cubes there. End of week 5, I spent a bunch more time on the AI. Now I've got a fully functional enemy helicopter, almost fully functional, that can fire, destroy the other helicopter. But still no special effects yet, no sounds, no explosions, really focusing on the core systems. And by the end of week 6 is when the game really started to look like a game. All the like main components were in place. I had vehicles, this concept of like, multiple waves, sound effects, lots of like bells and whistles and explosions and all those, kind of effects that are necessary. And the final week, was of course that second 99% that always happens in game development, which is just like endless polish, tweaking, testing, adding like the title screen and the finalizing the levels, and I added a landscape mode and so forth, and it just was a ton of work. And then I shipped it, and that was it really. So pretty quick process there. One thing that I wanted to share with everybody is this idea of gray boxing for people that might be kind of starting on their development journey. This footage here is from a HoloLens version of this game that I developed years ago. And back then I was just learning Unity. And one of the things I really got bogged down on was like, I was just endlessly tweaking the graphics and like messing around with explosions, and the project just wasn't progressing. And I realized that I was just getting distracted by like, the polish, right? So I chucked out all the assets, replaced them with cubes, and developed the core systems of the game, developed the gameplay, put everything in place, and then only then did I go back and replace them with assets. Now, this might seem kind of obvious in retrospect, but and it is a real technique that people use in the game industry. But it's not always obvious to everybody. It wasn't to me initially, but it really saves you a lot of time. Focus on the hard stuff first, the superstructure of your application, nail the experience, whatever it may be. If it's a game, make sure that it's actually fun, and only then go back and replace the assets, and then do whatever you want to polish it. The only caveat to this is that it takes a lot of self-confidence and belief in yourself, because like obviously this doesn't look very good initially, and you might wonder, will it ever be interesting? But it will be, and you really can test out and validate the experience in this way. And some of my biggest prototyping mistakes at Apple were when I deviated from this approach and kind of just like decided to go on visual polish, and early on, the message often got lost in what I wanted to convey. So yeah, gray boxing, can't speak enough about this technique. Try it out. I'm sure it'll make your projects go a lot quicker if you're finding yourself kind of meandering. So let's talk about the organization of this project in Lens Studio. So this is my scene hierarchy. You can see there's not a single 3D object in there. That's because we're in AR, and AR experiences should react to the environment, right? So this kind of concept of like having scenes like in traditional games like never really made much sense to me in AR. Everything is really code driven. So I have a lot of scripts. For example, I have, an object that has a variety of like utility scripts. All they do is register functions that I need, throughout the game. It's a pretty big code base, so I have a lot of like helper stuff going on. There's an orthographic camera. This is for all the 2D UX. So like, status bars and so forth, the title screen, all that stuff. You can see all of it's disabled. It's basically driven in code. The game controller decides what should be displayed at any given moment. And the last big component is the game controller itself. So hanging off of this object, I have just like the various music tracks used in the game. And you can see there's just a ton of scripts attached to the object. Most of them are helper scripts, but there's one big script, the game controller, and it has links back to those UX elements I mentioned. So it determines what's going to be displayed. And most importantly, all of my like objects in the game, the helicopters, enemies, whatever, they're just prefabs that are spawned dynamically as needed by the game controller. And so one thing that's interesting about Lens Studio is that, it's supposedly this like low code, no code tool for artists, and it is, but I found I'm not an artist, I'm a programmer, and Lens Studio is great for programmers. Everything's accessible through scripting, like everything. So if you're a developer, you definitely have a leg up on some people in this space. So like score one for the programmers. Another thing I found out for people that are kind of struggling with all the different events that Lens Studio has, and I confirmed this with a developer who works at Snapchat, the awake event is all you need. And that's how like everything in my system works. Like if you have to get update events or whatever, you write your script and subscribe to those events in code. It starts to resemble much more like a proper code base, like say Unity or something. So that's how everything I do is structured. On awake, subscribe to the events you want manually. It'll, I think, make your code a lot more organized. So let me talk about like how the game engine that I was talking about earlier works. So in Lens Studio, everything is a scene object, and those scene objects can have script controllers, and you can add a bunch of like JavaScript scripts to them. I do that, but I also have a certain kind of script that I call entity scripts. They're basically scripts that create a special kind of object that's relevant to my game, and I actually don't subscribe to any events from Lens Studio. What I do instead is I have another single object in the scene that holds the game engine, and the engine receives updates, and it updates all the entity scripts. So the entities, they register themselves to that engine, so that then I have like a lot of fine-grained control over how everything executes, because that's a little bit hard to do in Lens Studio. So I need to have that control. So this is kind of what the world looks like in my system. You have all these scene objects, all of them have scripts on there. Some of them are just, standard Lens Studio style scripts that receive updates for things like, explosions and so forth that, are kind of context free. But an entity is something that, what I call an entity is anything that has to interact with anything else in the world. So like, helicopters, the bullets, the vehicles, and those are special, and they're managed by the game engine. So this is what and I'm not going to go over all this, don't worry, but this is like the most basic entity. Basically, I create like there's this data structure that I create that has a bunch of fields that are important. The most important is like this update function, and the script, all it does is just add this object, creates an object, adds it to the engine, and the engine then goes back and calls the update function and uses all these other components to essentially do physics and all this stuff. So why would I do this? The reason was that when I started, one big thing was that the physics engine wasn't yet available. So Strikeforce uses my own physics. The physics is entirely custom. It's not using the Snapchat physics system because it predates that. And as a result, I needed very precise control of how the logic updates and how the physics updates occur and so forth. I also needed to control when objects are created and destroyed in a more precise fashion. And I also, like it's a game, so I wanted to be able to just query the world for things. So for example, like if I target enemies, that line of code right there lets me find like every enemy in the scene, right? So I needed to build that myself. Another thing that I do is, of course, environmental interaction. And I chose to go with plane detection, which is actually undocumented. I figured out how to do it, and I can share that with people. They just didn't bother to document it properly, but it is there. And I opted not to use meshing because I wanted this to run on a wide spectrum of phones. So, I detect planes. I have these like invisible, I basically create like these invisible box colliders around them. So that makes it appear as though you can like collide with furniture, but it's really just done by like fitting a box to the planes and then adding that to the physics system. Another important thing is like navigation in an unknown environment. I don't control the level, right? So what I do is I, detect the planes. I then like voxelize the entire space in 2D. So I create this grid. Each grid cell is like something like 30 centimeters, I can't remember, on a side. And then I go through and figure out like at each grid point, is there a plane there? If so, I mark the height of the plane. So the intensity of the color here represents like height. And now I've got like a data structure that I can easily, so if I want to like, send a helicopter from one point to another, I don't want to like bump into furniture and stuff, right? But now along the entire path, I can sample and I understand exactly what the elevation should be. So I know how high the ground clearance should be for the helicopters, and they can navigate around furniture. So that's a system that's done, and it's kind of expensive to build this, and it's being done constantly, like incrementally every single frame, and dynamically. A design consideration that I encountered was that, I wanted to, like, how do I have enemies come into the scene? Like, why are these things in the room anyway? I don't want to have things just like popping into existence out of nowhere, because I think that just, it's kind of immersion breaking and it's just kind of cheap. So what I did is I did the next cheapest thing, which is, for enemies, they essentially come in from off screen. So I'm always computing where the edge of the screen is. And like I parachute in the ground vehicles, and helicopters come in from behind. If you want to get really fancy, you can do things like, explode out portals out of the floor and stuff, and so forth. I didn't have time for that, but it's, also an option that I've done on other systems before. Another thing to deal with is that, this is Snapchat. It's got to be fast. You want people to get in the game immediately. A lot of AR experiences will have this like pre-mapping phase. Like my old HoloLens experience had that, but I didn't want to have that at all. So that means I have to, unfortunately, spawn enemies in a world that isn't yet static. So for example, there's this situation here where the tank is under the chair because the chair hasn't been detected as a plane yet. I haven't approached it. When I approach it, the system detects a plane, and unfortunately I just have to reposition the tank. So it's constantly like examining that. I can also move the chair, and eventually the system determines that there's no more plane there, right? And I don't want that tank just hovering in the air, so I kind of just snap it back down to the ground and so forth. Maybe there's a more clever way to do this, but it's something that I had to deal with, and I didn't want to have like a pre-scanning phase. So how do the AI behaviors work in this? So every helicopter, for example, like has a helicopter entity script, and that controls the dynamics of the helicopter. The player has one, the enemies all have one, and it receives like inputs from some other source, another script that tell it exactly how to steer. The enemy AIs have another script called the enemy helicopter controller, and all they do is they feed in those inputs to steer the helicopter as if they were the player. And the way they decide how to steer is they run this this thing called a behavior program. It's another like object that they have inside, and there's various ones for different scenarios, like attacking, patrolling, reacting to a collision. And each of these programs and these behavior program objects in turn contain a list of objects that are the actual basic movement pattern states. And those also will update, and they can take multiple frames. And so the behavior program goes through either in order or in random order, and so forth. So to be a little bit more clear what this looks like, the behavior program is an object that has an update callback. So whenever Snapchat updates the controller script, the enemy helicopter controller, it calls update on the behavior program. That has a list of like states. It knows which state it's on. It calls update on that. And it keeps doing that every frame until that state says that it's finished, like that movement pattern is finished. These movement patterns are very simple. And then it rotates into the next state, and it keeps doing that basically. So it's like one of these like Russian doll scenarios where everything is like a nested series of like these state machines. And that means that each like state machine is like pretty simple conceptually. And the power comes from the fact that they're essentially like a series of like kind of nested abstracted behaviors. And that abstraction is what essentially drives the entire like game. And I think it's, pretty much common in any sort of game. Then at the end, there's this like the overall game, right? Like how do you start a level? How do you spawn enemies? How do you move on, and print out like helper tutorial text and all that stuff, the kind of like big picture stuff. How do you get this simulation going? And that's the game controller. So it also, surprise, surprise, is a state machine. And it has like states for like, render the title screen, wait for, the first input, start the first level, print some text, spawn enemies, so forth. Each of these states can run for many frames, and they signal back when they're done, and the next one starts. So for example, like a spawn enemy state will create these like entities, and it's the engine that kind of then manages that game world independently and ticks, every frame, it updates all the entities. So these two like basically like machines are constantly chugging away, and that's what creates the entire essentially game. So I have one that controls like a, you know, the linear sequence of the levels and the kind of the big picture. Then there's always this like kind of simulation world running constantly, and I can add or remove things from that simulation world. So that's basically Strike Force in a nutshell. And I actually have one more thing, so I'll return to the slide, but I'll show you the slide later. You can, follow me on Twitter for updates. You can try the game out. I'll return to this, but since we have a couple more minutes, I wanted to show like just a little prototype that I put together using the Oculus Quest. It's kind of a vision. You know, everybody's talking about the metaverse, right? And I hate that term, but you know, it's not really what we want, right? Like I think. So like I kind of wanted to show now with, you know, these pass-through headsets on the horizon, namely like the Lynx and the Cambria, which is rumored to be coming out in May. You know, I think there's a better vision of like what the metaverse might look like. You know, what I really want personally is to be present in the real world. That's why we like AR, right? But I still want to be able to do things with people and bring in that power of like, you know, digital computing in a more natural interface. So I created this video and I just wanted to share, and I hope the sound is there. If not, please let me know and I'll have to just narrate it. You guys hear that?
Here's an idea I've been playing with. What if you had an augmented reality water cooler you could just approach and see who's around to talk? And what if you could do real world activities together?
Want to hear a little track that I made?
Oh, this sounds like Blue Monday. Let me put the bass track down. Okay, quick and dirty. Check this out. Let me know what you think.
This is starting to sound sick. Maybe we can play the whole song.
Yeah, let's do it. Maybe instead of working in VR, you just pop in during breaks and see which coworkers are hanging around the water cooler. Hey, Bill.
Hey, Bart. Feel like taking on the reigning champion?
Bring it on. If you're a developer or creator toiling away alone, wouldn't it be nice to quickly find like-minded people to share and talk shop with? Actually is included in Lens Studio, but you're right, it's undocumented. So why don't I just pull up the code tab here. There it is, you see it? And if I scroll down to the bottom, right there's the 3 events. Ah, there they are. As always, feel free to let me know what you think.
Yeah, so thanks a lot. That's pretty much it. Whoops. And yeah, so just kind of something to kind of, you know, food for thought. You know, I don't know why I made that. It was just I'm not sure if I'll continue the project or not. I have some other things that I'm working on now. But just kind of a sampling of what I'm kind of like thinking about and working on. So hope that was helpful to people.
That was awesome. Thank you, Bart. Passing to Barry for questions. Okay, from Edward, I'm not sure about everyone. With your game engine and entity framework, would you say you were taking advantage of Lens Studio or more like fighting to turn it into another development environment?
That's a really good question. I wouldn't say I felt like I was really fighting it. The thing is that, although it is kind of funny because it's like I was essentially replacing it with something that looks a lot more like Unity. And I think a lot of people are doing that with complex projects. It would be fighting it if it wasn't, there's a little bit of fighting going on there, but there's not really much to embrace given how simple the scripts are. There's really designed for like simple filters and not really robust projects with lots of different code files. But luckily enough, Lens Studio is like still simple enough that you're not really so much fighting it. You just feel like it's just really kind of like having to implement stuff that's not there. So I didn't really feel like my system was really easy to implement, and I never felt like I had to do anything crazy to make it work, which was nice. So I never really felt like there was any friction, and I was still able to interoperate. Like most of the scripts don't use the entity system. Like a lot of things that are standalone, like explosions, that can handle themselves, that don't really have to interact. You just kick them off, fire and forget. Still use the kind of Lens Studio framework, the really simple scripts. So I felt it worked out. But the problem is, yeah, that eventually, like when you build this up, you build up a library of components. It's not going to be interoperable with like someone else's completely different projects. It's going to really rely on this framework being there. So I suspect we'll probably see Snapchat at some point address some of the shortcomings of the scripting system and make it more robust. So I hope that answered the question. So not really a lot of friction, but more like building on top of something that's very simple to begin with and just doesn't have a lot there, and forces you to kind of build on top of it.
Awesome. A few more questions. This is from Caitlin from Tom for Bart. Did you have to massively compress Strikeforce to get it under 8 megabytes? And if you still have ample space left, if not.
Yeah, so I think it came out to about 7.5 megabytes. So a lot of it is kind of out of your hands. I mean, other than textures, of course. And yeah, I did work on compressing them. I probably could have compressed them further, honestly. The biggest problems were, textures, of course. Although you can get them down to be quite small. And Lens Studio has built-in compression that's quite good. But music and audio was a big problem because some things can't be compressed down. So the helicopter rotor sound is huge. And the reason is that Lens Studio is a little bit stuttery when it comes to like MP3 audio. So I had to, so for the rotor loop, which is constantly playing, the stuttering was really annoying. So I had to essentially embed it as a WAV file, which for some reason works better. It's uncompressed, perhaps that's why. And that took up like a solid 0.5 megabyte, which, that's a lot right there. So yeah, I mean, if you have some clever procedural techniques, that would help a lot. I think they're going to bump up the size to 10 megabytes and maybe introduce a streaming system. I don't really know. I've heard rumors of this. But yeah, it's a problem. I didn't have much left over. I could have done more though. If I wanted to expand the game, I would remove some of the audio tracks and so forth, rethink some of that. So if I didn't have music, it would be significantly smaller. We're talking like, I'm not sure off the top of my head, but it might have been like 5 megs or so. So still plenty of headroom. 3D models like take almost no space. Code is like negligible. So a lot more could be done. And I just ended up filling it with like, music and stuff like that. So you can do a lot. You can do a lot with 8 megabytes, surprisingly.
Awesome. Thanks, Bart. I'll ask 2 more questions, Bart, and then I'll open it up to the floor. And I know Caitlin's still here, and some other speakers maybe as well. Gull wants to know what kind of ML model do you use for the AI?
There's no ML. This is traditional game AI. So AI in the gaming sense is not AI in the machine learning sense. In fact, there are some great talks at GDC about AI that people should watch. I can't remember. One of them was like the simplest AI trick in the world or something from 2018. Basically, the way games work, although ML is starting to be used in like AAA games increasingly for certain things. To be honest, the way game AI works is they're really based on like simple approaches like state machines, and they're really, really simple. So like I said, the helicopter, it's just it knows where the player, it knows where the player is, it knows its target, and I implement behaviors that seem kind of fair or realistic. It basically will kind of switch between these macro states of like, am I attacking? Am I just patrolling? If I get hit while I'm patrolling, I switch to an attack state. The attack state has a series of potential harassment patterns. So there's like, strafe, circle around the player, hop over the player behind them, move to a random point. And it just, does these at random for a certain time limit, and then it goes back to a different state, right? So, and almost all games work this way. They're basically just a series of nested state machines. It's one of the oldest tricks in the book. Very, efficient, and it's easy to reason about as well. So I haven't seen a lot on like using ML in the way you might be thinking, but it is starting to be used for very specific things in like AAA titles, for example. But no, yeah, I mean, game AI is really simple. This is like Sega Genesis level stuff, and it hasn't changed much since then, to be honest.
Awesome. So
good question.
Yep, Gull, I hope that answered your question. I'm going to open it up to the floor. So if you have any questions for any of the speakers, feel free to chime in, and I'll just, if you guys have time, I'll just ask a few more questions. John, this is for Bart. John Muglia wants to know, did you by chance try implementing this concept into web AR utilizing the SDK?
No, I haven't actually had a chance to play with web AR yet. Super interested to see how it evolves. It absolutely could be done. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of toolkits out there, like Eighth Wall, I think is one of them. Or just doing it raw from scratch, given how simple this was. But no, I haven't tried it yet. I think the only issue I have with WebAR right now is that the distribution channel, monetization and so forth. To be honest, I probably wouldn't tackle a project of this scale, which took almost 2 months, without like a monetization strategy. But so I had a kind of a different objective with this one that was satisfied here. But yeah, I think WebAR I'm really rooting for. I hope that becomes a viable thing for people, because yeah, openness is a big deal.
Great. Caitlin, I know you mentioned the Poly Award win that you had. Was that for a web AR VR related project? Do you have experiences with those technologies?
This, in some, yes. Yes, and we were happy to win the award. I was the designer and part of the person who did the design and programming on a team that was a spin-off team of 3. So Jackie Lee, Yenling Kuo, and I, we built these worlds that were really inspired by storytelling and Frankenstein. So the idea, I think it loosely links to this idea of AI, because the story Frankenstein is subtitled The Modern Prometheus. What's the idea like when we can harness fire and have our creativity be what distinguishes us from machines? And also, Dr. Frankenstein's kind of cursed move was that he didn't give the monster a name. Like, he invented something and then didn't take ownership over it. So we have all of these layers of worlds. There are applications that can go in. We're diving into AR more, but creating really accessible web-based programming through this company that is related. Jackie and Yenling met at MIT Media Lab. Then they connected with me to do the storytelling. And then we got linked up with Smithsonian, accessing their open access objects. And so some of what we've been doing is diving into new stories, new creations that have to do with the open access objects and creating treasure hunts. So this idea of mapping and objects and putting them into spaces, I can imagine that being really key for more AR applications. And all ages, really liking that process of authenticating the objects. Now we've been diving into possibilities using blockchain and thinking about crypto and creating even these ideas of NFTs for objects and making them robust, and really, tackling this question of what does it mean to have fidelity and reliability on the authentic object in a way that's not restrictive, not thinking about, using something to make it inaccessible, but how can we track something's progress? And as a side note, one of the projects goes into Egyptian artifacts, and, it really inspires me thinking about the liberation of access to objects that sometimes politically were taken away from certain countries in the past, where that was their space of origin. So now, it's a chance for people in different parts of the globe to, take back that accessibility after centuries of being deprived from the history of those objects. I can talk more about the project. I love it. Thanks for asking.
Thank you so much. And just a question I'll ask to both you and Bart, whoever would want to answer it. We have a bunch of folks in here who are interested in getting started within the augmented reality industry. So what are some skills that you'd recommend learning in both of your respective fields in order to get involved?
I can start with that one. I think, yeah, I mean, I think it really, makes sense to, pick a platform that you want to work with, but I think it makes sense to look at platforms that are big and popular. Unfortunately, I think that I would say that it's not a bad idea to pick up Unity. So there was a gentleman who was who was promoting his book. I think he's no longer with us right now, but that's how I started with the HoloLens. You can do Unity with iOS using Lightship. That's a Unity plugin, or just AR Foundation or AR Kit. It's a little bit cumbersome, unfortunately, to deploy the phone and so forth. But Unity is a valuable skill, and a lot of the principles apply to VR as well. So that's, I think, become kind of the de facto platform of choice. After that, there's the other options are the big options today are, Snapchat Lens Studio. That's a great one. It has the best deployment story. You're stuck within the Snap app, which might not be great for everybody, but it's a great way to start. It's a great prototyping tool. It's very full functioned. It has all the features that ARKit has under the hood, almost sometimes better. Really easy to get started with. The only downside maybe is that besides being stuck in that platform, it's JavaScript and it's kind of a simplified, kind of weird scripting environment that I don't think is really going to carry forward. But the principles are all the same. And then lastly, ARKit itself, like raw ARKit, probably the hardest option to start with by far. Because it's you'll be learning Swift, actual iOS development. There's a lot there. It's not anything like Unity or Lens Studio. It's like just sitting writing code. Basically, there's no scene editor, nothing like that. So I'd say Snapchat is the easiest. Unity probably second. More beefy, but it's probably more broadly applicable. And then if you really have the programming skills, maybe go into ARKit with Swift on iOS directly. I think those are the big options right now.
Awesome. Thank you, Bart.
I'll chime in. I'm listening to Bart's answers and taking notes too, because I do, I work with Snap, Unity. It helps for what I do with storytelling to think about some of the design principles too, and kind of go. I think these are parallel complementary roles. So I've been in roles on hackathons as one of the advisors, and some of the teams are asking me, well, what about design? What about that human-centered, kind of use cases? So I think as much as you can also get intersectional and try to join a few hackathons and be part of teams, then you start to see, oh, there's, some of the code is complementary skills with things that are classic and maybe not code-based, but things about these storytelling. If you're curious about the hero's journey, you could look at Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell, and then start going into Christopher Vogler, some of his work with stories and user journeys and mapping. And everyone who's really curious, feel free. I have a lot of those parallel inspirations on my website and research. I do learn by curiosity. So for me, it's, again, part of this is code. And then part of it, I've gone to live projection mapping meetups and places where I start to learn more about that technology and how to integrate it into the design. So I will say, I think that Lightship is really great. The fact that Niantic built that, and I know they have a few kind of challenges lately where you can join and be part of teams, so you don't have to do this on your own. Bart, thanks for making your story so visible, because when you mapped out the stages, I thought that formative was also really helpful, because sometimes people only see the final product of what you've created, and they don't see that stage by stage struggle and layer. Yeah. So that's another thing I wanted to add there, that I think it's really quite valuable to show each other our formative growth.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's really important. I know that we live in this age of self-promotion, and so if you go on Twitter, you see all these cool, look what I made, and it can be a little bit daunting, right? Because when you first open these things up, it's like, oh gosh, where do I start? And the fact is that it's going to look like garbage for a while, and that's part of the process. And yeah, I just wanted to really stress that gray boxing technique. Yeah, that was and something that I learned at Apple as a prototyper was yeah, it's like it was the weirdest thing. We would show things, and I can't talk about what we did, but there's all kinds of prototyping going on for all kinds of things at Apple, and the process is pretty much the same everywhere. You show things to directors and execs and whoever other teams and so forth. And it's like yeah, you didn't want to go too deep into UX design and stuff, because it could just end up being distracting. It's kind of like if you if you make something let's say you're trying to prototype a mobile phone app, and the first thing you do is make the UX really beautiful, and people are going to look at it and it looks like a finished product, but maybe the interaction's not there yet, and they're going to start nitpicking the colors and things that are just completely irrelevant. It's like you want to show them I don't know, you wanted to make a note-taking app, but suddenly people are sitting there criticizing your font or whatever, and they're not even getting the big picture, and then you're distracted. So yeah, there's really a lot that, yeah, I wish, you know, people understood about the process, and it's just start simple, and don't worry about the visual polish. The downside is you might not be able to show it widely yet, but you know, you can show it to people that are close to you, and you know, test even with like cubes, the basic interactions will, you know, or something just a step up above cubes. The basic interactions should be possible to mostly dial in without any sort of that visual polish, and then you can always go in and just kind of slog through the visuals later. It's the core interaction that's really important, and yeah, so I always love talking about how the sausage is made, because I think that's yeah, you're right. It's something people don't talk about very often.
Thank you, Bart. I love how you went through each of your different weeks and how you progressed through your development. I was wondering if that was something you planned beforehand, or like, was that just created week by week? Did you decide your tasks?
It was actually week by week, and I think it was around the second or third week when I really got the game engine in there. I knew I had to have a game engine, something that was kind of like what I was used to in other environments. That I made a spreadsheet, and like I'm not a very good person to ask about like project management. I'm terrible. I just use a spreadsheet. Just like sometimes I just use text files, and I just had like a big list of stuff that I knew had to be accomplished, and like I put like a rough timeline, like this day, you know, I want to do this, because I had like a time limit on myself. I didn't quite adhere to that. It took me about 50% longer than I thought it would. But and it also kind of helped that I had done, you know, games before, and I had done even a helicopter game on HoloLens. Now it was completely different in terms of how it was architected, but I do think that over time that experience builds up, and so it was a little bit easier for me to see where I wanted to go with it. But yeah, yeah, so I kind of knew what the core things I needed were, and then once those were in place, I forced myself to write like a spreadsheet of what features, because it's really easy for scope creep to happen, where you just start like, oh, I'm going to do this and this and this, and it's going to be all this crazy stuff. And I found myself cutting a lot of things out, because I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this in like, you know, a month and a half or whatever, if I had all these other features in. So it's kind of a mix of both. I kind of just started week by week, and then I formalized it a little bit by making a big list of what needed to be in the final version.
Question, Daniel, I see you're still on the chat. I'm curious, from a hardware perspective, what would one need in order to get involved?
So we started off our original product connected through USB, and you could use a single core of an ARM controller. In fact, we normally demonstrate with a Raspberry Pi 3 just because it's cheap and everyone knows roughly what category it's in. We've recently switched to sending data over Ethernet, and there's two reasons for that. Firstly, we're doing a lot of industrial tracking, and the 5-meter limit of USB was really quite restrictive. The other thing is you'll find that a lot of SoCs out there, the system on chips that are running the various headsets, actually have an Ethernet interface hiding somewhere on the chip that is not being used. So it's great to get in through Ethernet, which has got a nice low latency path to memory, and you're not fighting with USB hubs and all the other USB peripherals that are sitting around on the SoC.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. And Caitlin, I just saw you posted the write-up on the chat. So I look forward to reading that as well.
Thanks. Yeah, that gives more information based on your great question about it.
Okay, awesome. And Bart, let us know when the water cooler app is available for the Quest.
Will do. Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to really build it out, but it's got some problems in terms of like who would really use it or how to start. But yeah, definitely I'm really interested in social and social VR, social AR, co-located stuff. So yeah, if I have anything to show, I'll definitely show you guys. And if anybody has anything that they want to talk about with me, always feel free. I'm always, you know, I'm unemployed. I'm a bum, so I have plenty of time to talk.
Okay, I have a wild question then. When you say social co-located, because what I was sharing about those three aspects, did that make sense to you that it would be? Because it just came up in my mind pretty much a couple days ago when I was thinking, oh yeah, because you know I design a lot for social, and I was like, okay, same time, same place. Because people say, you know, again, one of my little phrases with AR is that the place is a space with meaning. So the AR application is what gives the semantic, like the meaning in the space, are how we create the AR interaction. But now we can create, same place, different time.
Yeah.
Same time. Anyway, I just wondered if that read to the audience, anyone can answer in this group.
I definitely, I'm a huge proponent of social AR and co-located AR in particular. And for those who don't know what that means like, being in the same space with somebody and seeing the same thing. So imagine having in the future an AR headset. And, a lot of people haven't thought about this. Some people have, some people haven't. It's really interesting to see who has and who hasn't. But I think some people maybe just assume that it'll happen. But right now it's hard to do. But imagine like, the two of us having an AR headset or a pass-through VR headset, whatever it might be, in the same room and being able to see the same virtual digital object in the same place, right? For those who haven't been fortunate enough to experience that, it's a really magical experience. It's really cool. It's really interesting. And I think it's very useful besides just gaming. But yeah, for storytelling, I definitely noticed that in your presentation. I think it's huge, and it's a bit hard to do right now. I think I've done it. You can do it with off-the-shelf hardware. It depends. Like there's all kinds of hacks and stuff, and people are starting to slowly do it in the Quest ecosystem, using these kind of like gross hacks to synchronize the systems. ARKit has native support for it, but it's not very widely used. And I think Lightship, of course, has support for it as well. And I think Snapchat, to a very limited extent, has connected lenses. It's a thoroughly underexplored area. I'm a big believer in it, but yeah, I guess it's just due to kind of the technical barriers right now that make it a little bit clumsy to set up these experiences. And because we don't have real AR HMDs yet, that's a long way off. And so unfortunately, that's where the real magic is. So not many people, but I think the day is coming pretty soon where this will be possible. I'm hoping the Facebook Cambria headset will hopefully have some of this. But yeah, I can go on about that. It's a really passion topic of mine. And gosh, I have a ton of thoughts about co-located AR for sure.
Yeah, I've heard that the aspect that Niantic is rolling out like soon, if not now, is the co-location and the object, having the object be anchored in time and space, and then the ability in live time to have, two or more people really changing it and affecting it and seeing it transform. And I think that gives me goosebumps. I feel like, you can have that as part of a social experience. I would want to, teach classes in that space, work in that space.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think there's a ton of cool stuff you could do. And if you start mixing in like location-based, like you sort of the Unreal Garden, there's just tons of possibilities there. And also just productive, things like, imagine being able to take notes together when, I often hang out with, or not often, but these days I only occasionally see a lot of my friends. We're all separated geographically and we talk shop when we get together, and everybody's like, did you check this out? I read this article or I saw this thing, and half of it you forget. You pull out your phone, start looking it up in Google, like someone gives you a movie recommendation, right? Like, what if that was like, what if I could just like, we can kind of like transcribe our conversation on like a little virtual whiteboard that pops up together and, mutually agree on what goes into that transcript and then just save it into your like messages, right? Like things like that, being able to share a piece of content, play a game together, or go to a location in a park together and experience like a shared story or something. That I think has enormous potential, but is a super underexplored area, by the way. So a lot of potential for innovation there.
So I'm interested in learning in the brain, and I didn't say this in my presentation, but I changed my background. This is not a made up place. This is a world outside of Brussels, Belgium, where I used to live. And in the springtime, the bluebells come out, and the whole forest. This is sort of an homage to Aaron as well, who I think is not here anymore, but the olfactory, I used to go there after work just to go for a run and smell the forest and like be in a place that my senses felt connection to. And I think that because I moved all over the world, I encode my memories with place and with objects. And, it's been a little hard, understatement, but in lockdown where you have the same, location every day, it's like I want to go to different places. And I think AR can do that, where suddenly our memories are richer. We have that connection in our brain to objects for stories. So, I know science is pointing our way there. And I think the creativity can couple with that and make it an engaging experience that feels better for our life.
Yeah, totally agreed.
I'll maybe add in a personal thought on the co-location AR. I worked with a large American company, and we had these giant video conferencing rooms that they spent a lot of money setting up. And there were 1 or 2 occasions where, rather than fly from Israel to the States, I would actually, move 50 kilometers from where I was living, and I would spend 8 hours a day in the video room when my colleagues had flown to be on the other side. And you actually pass above that bar where, okay, you've spent 3 hours in a room with people and your brain forgets that there's a screen in the middle. And that's what I'm looking to hit in AR.
Yeah. That's I think going to be one of the big applications for mixed reality. It's all a spectrum, is the being able to be present with someone, whether they're physically there or far away too, right? That's kind of what I was trying to show with that water cooler prototype. And I think obviously everybody who's experienced like a virtual meeting like in Horizon or whatever, there's definitely something there to it, right? It's really cool. It still has a long way to go, but it's like there's really like potential there to bridge that distance gap. And yeah, how cool would it be to just feel like we're all just chatting like literally right next to each other? Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much. As John said, fantastic dialogue, and I completely agree. It's so nice to hear everyone's own perspective on such fascinating topics, and I think it's one of the reasons that we have this group. So I hope we could have some more discussions like this in the future. I know we're a bit past time, and with that, I want to open it up to everyone in the meetup. If anyone has a project they'd like to share, feel free to post it on the chat. You could share your screen. If not, we will call it a night, but really appreciate you joining New York Augmented Reality. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bart. Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Caitlin, I was thinking we should do like some type of, I know you're busy, but some type of like AR meditation meetup at some point, if you'd be interested.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
we can do some kind of well-being. Yeah, you and I can talk about it. I am busy, but I carve out time. People who save room for dessert, it's like it's like I have to save room for what matters.
Yeah.
And I think that would be a lot of fun. And we can also meet up again. Like I said, Bart, I'm equally enthusiastic about the co-location and AR. So there could be a part 2 in a year where we check back and there's more to share. I think a lot is advancing pretty quickly in this domain.
Hopefully less than a year.
Yeah.
I think, you can do a lot. There's a lot of stuff you can do right now. Like I said, Lightship, connected lenses with Snap. And if you, depending on what kind of experience you want to build, like with a Quest, I did this laser tag project. I almost wonder if I should have done I'd be happy to do a talk on that if you want me to, Andy.
Great project.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that at some point. But the idea was that like it's like I don't even know what to call it, right? There's a spectrum between VR and AR. It's technically VR, but it's like conformed to your room. So it's like I think it's what like some people used to call augmented virtuality. Like nobody's heard that term before, but it just shows that there's like such a continuum here. But yeah, you can do stuff with Quest, like, and now with pass-through on Quest, you can do like there's people doing I think it's like was it Unity Spaces that is this project? It's for remote co-location, but they also have I think a demo of someone in the same space doing something. And I think there's like Space Pirate Trainer has a co-located game mode. There's like a few people out there that are doing stuff with Quest, where you set up ahead of time, you synchronize the coordinate system, like you touch the controller to the same spot kind of thing. Now you're in the same space, it's passed through, you can see each other, granted very grainy black and white, but you can like kind of start doing things together. So it's a great prototyping platform for that kind of stuff, I think.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'd be interested. I'd like to see the laser tag thing too.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I mean,
whenever you want to share, whenever you want to share it, you're welcome on. Just let me know.
Sure. Yeah. Probably not next time, but I'll let you know. Yeah. But there's a video on it's linked on my Twitter. There's a YouTube video. I think it's like the pinned post on my Twitter account.
Okay.
And it's by no means like the first of this that's been done, but that one was kind of using a novel way of like synchronizing the coordinates that hadn't been done on Quest before. But yeah, I mean, it's a game experience, not really a story or a utility experience, but there are platforms you can explore that with. And then there's ARKit, which had Swift Shot, which was demoed by Apple a couple years ago. And I don't think many people have done a lot of co-located AR because the phone, it kind of sucks as a medium, unfortunately, for AR. But Swift does, it's limited, like it's, the co-located SLAM is not the best. I mean, it's pretty good, but like it's off by a few centimeters. So depending on your application, that may or may not matter. But it's really easy to set up. And I've certainly worked with it before. And yeah, it's definitely something that I feel is kind of underutilized, unfortunately.
So there's a meditation related company called Trip. Nanea Reeves is one of the founders, and she was talking with me. They've coupled with Niantic and had a partnership formed, and we're working on a co-location. So, watch this space. They'll be announcing, I think, in a week, maybe a couple weeks, about something that they'll be rolling out that I can't talk about yet.
Cool. I'll be excited to see that. Yeah, I love that space. It's just magical.
Well, you guys seem to have a really great synergy in the augmented reality space. So feel free to connect with one another, and hopefully you can work together on some project using storytelling and programming and all that cool stuff. So
this whole group is awesome. And I have to just give a shout out. I don't know if the audio is available to Barry, but thanks for connecting in the fall too. Barry had been saying how wonderful this group is, and the talks I've been attending, just so awesome. And
thank you, Barry.
Appreciate it. You're still muted, but you can't unmute.
All right, guys, we'll speak
All
soon.
right.
Have a good night.
I'll see you later. Bye,
Okay.
everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.